Good morning, good night, good evening, and why is my camera so bad? That's the question we're all asking today, and I know I am. Welcome to the reading room. I'm Mark Reed, and I will be your host while I try and fix my camera. Thank you. So welcome back. Today is my favorite day. It is Fundamentalist Fails Day, and I just love the fails. Love the fails. So we're back again. With this time, I do have to shout out, Pinworm gave me a link to a few different people. I went to some guy called Cameron Bertuzzi. Apparently he runs a channel called Capturing Christianity, which is really rather huge. And this one caught my eye immediately because I had already watched the interview between Alex O'Connor and Rhett McLaughlin, who does Good Mythical Morning. And he's a very famous. He's really blown up, and he seems like genuinely a really nice guy. He does sort of YouTube, and he was talking about why he left Christianity. It was basically called "Why I Left Christianity." And Alex O'Connor interviewed him, and it's an excellent interview. I highly recommend it. It's very interesting, and it does have a lot of similarities with other deconversion stories and things like that. And he goes into a lot of things about where he started. He apparently was sort of while he was in uni, he was a young Christian evangelist, basically. He was part of Cru, which, according to what I looked up, it was sort of Crusaders for Christ, a university sort of interest group that sort of has the Christian students sort of really evangelize and stuff. Which I mean, I don't have a real big a big problem with. I mean, there's all kinds of interest groups on campus. There's acting groups, chess groups, all kind of stuff. So I don't really have a problem with it. But he was sort of talking about his attitude then and sort of his attitude now towards people that are not Christian and people that are Christian, and it was a really fascinating interview. And he, what I like about Rhett is, well, for a start, he's a very handsome man. I'll give him that. But that aside, right? He he's very genuine. He's very, very honest, genuine. Very just incredibly sincere kind of guy, and it seems to be a really nice guy. So him talking with Alex O'Connor. Alex, of course, I'm a huge fan. I think Alex is a fantastic thinker. He's still very young for his profession, which is philosophy. As philosophers go, he's really on the young side. Most hit their mark a bit later, like think Bertrand Russell or people like that. So I'm a big fan of Alex O'Connor, and I haven't seen much of Red. I'm not a Good Mythical Morning super fan or anything, but I must admit he's a really nice guy, really sincere. So they're talking and stuff, and this apparently caused. I didn't realize at the time, but it just caused a huge tsunami of apologists getting very upset and sort of getting very, very angsty about this, mostly because he's sort of one of the bigger YouTube stars and he's talking very candidly about it. He sort of, in the interview, he sort of says that he felt obliged because he was known as a Christian and a defender of Christianity, but he wanted to sort of set the record straight, which I think is sort of very, very good. The thing about this, and I will say this up front, Cameron Bertuzzi doesn't have a lot to say about it. Like, as far as sort of, so he called his video, and this is why I had like the Christo splain over the top, because he really is a Christian sort of mansplaining or Christo splaining, because he's not, sort of mansplaining, but you get the idea. He's speaking for somebody else. He called his video "The Real Reason Rhett Left Christianity." Like, he can't say that himself. It's very strange for someone to go, "Hey, there's an interview with this person. Here's the real reason they're saying this." It's sort of very dismissive. I think I'm not 100% sure that he can sort of say that, but let's get into it. This might not be a huge one. It's only sort of an 18-minute clip, but I will have a lot to say about it because really it's interesting just how little sort of for such a huge title, a huge, maybe it is clickbait, for such a huge, the real reason Rhett left, he doesn't actually have a lot to say, right? Like it's kind of like this real problem that he basically just says some stuff at the end. But we'll have a look at it. I'll probably have a lot to say about what Rhett says as well.
So you've probably heard that Rhett McLaughlin left Christianity because he became convinced that evolution was true, but that's actually not what happened. The real reason he left his faith is something far deeper, way more fundamental, and honestly, much more unsettling.
Yeah, so and I've watched the whole interview, and so I think that he's sort of saying, well, he didn't not think it's true. It's a more unsettling reason. I'm not sure why that is. I think we have to talk about deconstruction just a little bit. So deconstruction isn't like an atheist thing. Okay, that's the first thing. A lot of Christians hear deconstruction, oh, that's the thing where atheists go and hate God. No, that isn't what deconstruction is. Deconstruction is basically tearing down long-held beliefs to see if there is any actual support for them. It's basically skepticism. It's basically going, well, I've got this long-held belief. I assume that it's true. Can I actually basically tear it down? And is there any foundation to build it back up? Right? That's essentially what deconstruction is. And it's not just, say, a God belief that may be a long-held belief. It might be, my country is the greatest in the world, right? Our country is the best country in the world. And we got a lot, everybody does that. You grow up and you're like, oh, Australia is the best country in the world, mate. It's the best country in the world. There's no other place that's as good as here, while you're being savaged by snakes and spiders. And that's something to tear down and build it back up. Another one might be something like, the West is the good guys and the Middle East is the bad guys, right? Like that's something that sort of you grow up with in the Western culture. Like the West is the people that have done all these things and is responsible for all science. And, and the other countries in the Middle East and Eastern, they're the real bad guys. It might be that, democracy is the good guys, communism is the bad guys kind of thing. And that deconstructing it is saying, hey, can I actually find support for that? And what you may find is you deconstruct it and you find all these instances of, say, the West doing some really horrible stuff. So you're like, well, both sides can be bad, and you generate a much more accurate representation of the reality around you. And that's what deconstruction is for. It is tearing down those long-held beliefs and making sure they have a foundation. It's related in a lot of ways to something like street epistemology, where they're asking questions about beliefs to see if the person really knows why they believe the things that they do, or finds the reasons why whether those reasons are good reasons. I will always remember that clip from, I think it was from the Newsroom, who they said, oh, explain why America's the greatest country on earth. And the reporter, the anchor guy, played by, who was the Dumb and Dumber guy, of all people? I've had a mental blank. Anyway, he's a great actor. Daniels. I will remember it in a second. Or better yet, I can Google it and stop wasting all of your time. Jeff Daniels? Is it Jeff Daniels? Jeff Daniels, yeah. Kind of says, well, when we look at it, we're 20th in education, something then infant mortality, where this in, he really spells out that what the actual reality is. And that to me is part, that is deconstruction. It's basically going, there's this long held belief. Is that actually true? And you know, it is, but I also want to say deconstruction is, it's almost necessary, in my opinion, for self-actualization. So we got another term, self-actualization. If you've been with me for a while, you may know what that is. If you don't, self-actualization is being basically the best version of yourself you can be. It's saying, well, I'm going to be myself, but the best possible version of that. It sort of is this stage of self-development and self-growth that we say, hey, I'm going to self-actualize, be really honest with who I am, what my skills are, what my flaws are. You know, it is that understanding that we kind of drop the ego, you know, this ego idea that what we want to be and what we would like ourselves to be, and rather embrace what we actually are and all of its good and bad. And that self-actualization, it doesn't come without that deconstruction process, in my opinion. I think you have to deconstruct to sort of understand the world around you and sort of understand yourself. I think you do have to deconstruct that. And I don't think there's any way to self-actualization without understanding yourself. I really believe that. So why deconstruct? It's basically because we have a tendency to fall into patterns of thought that are not well supported, that sort of we see them as sort of axioms, you know, like, well, everybody knows America's the greatest country in the world. No, everybody doesn't know that. No, that's the thing. Not only that, even if everybody believed it, it doesn't necessarily make it true. We've got to deconstruct these long held beliefs and then re-implement them. Even stuff with science, right? If we have some weird data in science, we deconstruct everything and then build it back up in order to change our view of the world. A lot of this, you know, like for instance, the gravity theory of gravity, right? You had Newton, his theory of gravity. We deconstruct it because things don't fit, and then Einstein built it back up with a more accurate, like, so there's nothing problematic about deconstructing. Deconstruction, when applied to a god, is sort of tearing down that idea that you know that it's true, or you believe that it's true unconditionally, and building back up the foundations of what can you actually determine. So, you know, deconstruction is incredibly important for everybody because we all get stuck in these patterns of belief that are not well supported. So I think it's incredibly incredibly important. I thought you were talking about me for a second there, Al. If I'm like sponsored by Dapper Dan, they have made a tremendous mistake, quite frankly. But I realized you were talking about you know, capturing Christianity here, Cameron here.
In my view, the pitfall that led Rhett away from Christianity is quietly undermining the faith of millions, possibly even yours.
Look, from what I saw of the interview, I don't think that's Rhett's intention, right? I don't think he is sort of going out there being a sort of crusader for atheism or anything. I don't think that's his intention at all. From what I got in the interview and what I understood it, he was seen as a Christian by a lot of people because when he was younger, before he kind of, not before, but sort of at the same time he really made it big on YouTube, he was kind of questioning and losing his faith kind of thing, right? That was how he talked about the progression. So to say, well, he's quietly undermining it. No, he's not. He's not being quiet about it. Like Alex O'Connor, as far as our circles go, sort of the theist atheist circles, is a rather large channel. It's very prominent in atheism. So he's not being that quiet about it. And the guy said he felt like, because people were assuming he was still a Christian, he felt like he was lying to his audience, right? He was misrepresenting himself to his audience, so he wanted to clear it up. But at no point did he sort of encourage other people to leave the church or encourage other people to be like him. At no point did he do that, right? Like, he just told his story. So I really think that Cameron here is putting a lot of, emphasis on what Rhett's doing that he's not actually doing. The thing is, does it undermine Christianity? I think that a lot of fans may look to deconstruct themselves. Like, I think that might happen, but I don't think you can point at Rhett and blame him for that just because he says, hey, I'm not a Christian. I haven't been a Christian for quite some time, and I feel like I have to clear this up, kind of thing. So, yeah, I think this is kind of really poor of Cameron. He never, he's not doing atheist content. He's not really talking about religion at all. He didn't really talk about religion with Alex O'Connor. He more just talked about his life and, like a lot of the deconversion stories you hear, what made him question and what made him leave. That's all. But to Christians, that is, oh, somebody out there is doubting, that is a danger to all of us. Why? If you've got this fundamental truth that you claim to have, why is one person doubting such a big issue? It's so nonsensical. If somebody like apostate prophet, I almost said apostate Christian, apostate prophet converted to Christianity, I'm like, so I don't care. What? That's his choice. I don't see, I'm not going, oh, he's undermining all of atheism. No, what are you talking about? He apparently, had a conversion. Big deal. It doesn't matter. Why would I care? I don't care. I sort of said he's hanging out with David who'll probably convert before it even happened. I just like, bleh. I don't care.
So in this video, I'm going to unpack Rhett's own words, expose the hidden turning point behind his deconstruction.
The hidden turning point. Like, if nothing was hidden, he talked about it openly. You're just sort of going, well, if he deconstructs and said it was very useful and helpful and, served him very well, other people might do the same. So I've got to, pocket sand. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, no. The reasons why he's saying isn't really the reasons. Trust me, bro. What the hell? I don't. Wow.
And most importantly, at the end, I'm going to share exactly how you can avoid falling into this same devastating trap. I'm Cameron Bertuzzi. You are watching Capturing Christianity, where we explore deep questions about faith, truth, and reason.
Yeah. I mean, the questions might be deep, but you're not exactly pushing the Mariana Trench there, buddy. Like, seriously, what he says about this is so, I hate to use the word, but it's so lightweight. Like, it really is. And I'll sort of explain why I'm saying that afterwards, because holy crap.
If you find value in these videos and want to support my work, you can do so by becoming a patron at the link in the description below. So to really understand the deeper reason why Rhett left Christianity, let's jump straight into a recent conversation he had with Alex O'Connor.
Yeah, so I've seen the entirety of this, and it is a really good watch, right? It is really good. Alex is, intelligent, very, very astute, very sort of intellectually engaged, asking very good questions. Rhett is very honest, very open, very sincere. I really highly recommend it. I honestly think that Rhett's just saying what he thinks and what he honestly believes, which is fine. Even if that was, hey, this is why I believe in Christianity, that's fine. Like, as long as he's being honest and sincere about it, well, but it's like that. It's a calamity when any celebrity leaves Christianity. It's like the end of the world for these guys.
In this clip, Rhett shares a story from when he first joined staff with Campus Crusade. He gets handed this book by astronomer Hugh Ross, who I've had on my channel. He argues for an old Earth, but he also argues against evolution. Now, pay close attention here, because this exchange actually gives us our first real clue about what led Rhett away from Christianity. Let's watch.
Okay, so the thing that and because I've seen this, I'll just sort of paraphrase. I'm not quoting directly, but basically, Red is sort of saying he grew up with all of these beliefs and all of these established beliefs that the Christians around him kept sort of saying that the Earth was 6,000 years old. That because he not Red wasn't just a Christian; he was a young Earth creationist. He was one of these yerfers, as I call them. Um, so he kind of then found a book by another Christian that said the Earth was obviously older than that because of course it is. All of the geology, all of the scientific fields that have confirmed that are ridiculous. It's just it cannot be six. That it just can't be. Like almost every geologist knows that it just can't be 6,000 years old. So it sort of started this thing of, well, what else you know is untrue about what I've been thinking? And this is sort of the start of deconstruction, right? If you find out that you've had a long held belief that, say, um you know that just say you think all Mexican people are untrustworthy and nasty and whatever, and that's been taught to you for a long time of your growing up, and then you find out that, hey, then you meet a Mexican and they're just an awesome person. You might be going, well, what else is it that I've been taught that also isn't true? And one of that was evolution, and Rhett sort of looked at evolution, read a book by Francis Collins, who worked on the Human Genome Project. He's still a Christian, but sort of he found out, hey, evolution is actually true as well. And so this begins that deconstruction. I've had this belief, this surety that the Earth is 6,000 years old, and life was created and didn't evolve. It was created 6,000 years ago. Adam and Eve, garden, talking snake, that nonsense. It starts to go, well, what else? Is the whole thing of Christianity untrue? And that's where deconstruction, you'll basically tear it down and say, well, do I have any reason to believe this is correct?
Watch this clip.
So shortly after the engineering stint, go on staff of Campus Crusade. At that point, you're going to the staff training and you're taking the seminary classes and your initial. And I was always I was not like a super deep student of theology, but.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes, thank you, Jedi. If Tom Cruise left Scientology, they would have a freak out. They would freak out. I wouldn't be surprised if they assassinated him, to be honest with you. Like, seriously. They have invested so much into that man, and he's the face of Scientology. And they would absolutely freak out. Of course, Rhett isn't the same. He's not the face of Christianity, kind of thing. I don't know who would be. Imagine if Jesus deconverted. That's like Tom Cruise leaving Scientology. If Jesus came back and said, you know what, I'm not a Christian, I'm an atheist, there is no God. That is how bad Tom Cruise leaving Scientology would be. Well, yeah, no, I get you. But if your firmly held belief is there are none, it may start that deconstruction process. That's all that I'm saying. Like, it doesn't require you to find out all your previous health beliefs to start that deconstruction process. Sometimes all it needs is going, well, that one belief is wrong. What else is wrong? And that starts the process as well. Can I tear them all down and then build up a more accurate representation of the world is generally what deconstruction is. So no, I totally agree with you. And when I said that I really meant that. Like, some people will never change their minds. I totally understand. But like I said, to self-actualize, I believe you really have to deconstruct all of those beliefs that you just assume are right, and then start to build up what you can actually support with good rational thinking and evidence. You know, racists will never self-actualize. I think that's a fairly uncontroversial statement.
I would say moderately deep, and there were certain ideas that I would gravitate towards and things that I kind of.
You know what? The most hilarious one would be Jesus coming back and saying he was a Scientologist. That would be hilarious. You know,
I like to think about and talk about. At that same time, I was given a book, and I never really thought about the intersection of science and faith. I think the way that I would have described it is, yeah, I think that most scientists are not Christians. Most scientists are atheists, and they've come up with some pretty wacky ideas to try to explain the world and why people are the way that they are, why the world.
And that's the thing. Like, we've heard that before from these these kind of young earthers, like that science is this, you know, all of these really dodgy people doing these really you know, satanic rites that they're just trying to undermine the truth of God. I've heard that before. That's the thing. I've had that said to me before, that these scientists, they're all in a conspiracy to try and make it look like evolution is a thing, you know. And absolutely, I totally get where he's coming from. And, you know, I might add, it takes a lot to admit that, hey, you had this belief and it was wrong.
Is the way that it is, and they're mostly just desperate attempts to explain the world without God's involvement. So that whole thing about evolution and how long the world has been here, that's probably all BS. But I didn't think about it any more deeply than that. I wasn't like a staunch young Earth creationist. I didn't think about that issue in particular. But I picked up a book from an astronomer, Hugh Ross. And I'm sure, you know, if I've mentioned this before, and you know, he has a Christian ministry that is like very anti-evolution, but very pro old universe.
Right. So basically he's saying, hey, this one belief in the young universe, the 6,000-year-old universe, because of the Old Testament, you know, God spoken into existence, was basically, you know, this book sort of cracked it. Yeah, that's totally understandable. But he'll go on to sort of say, hey, that opened a door, as it often does.
From the standpoint of astronomy, which you know, obviously when you look at all the astronomical evidence and the speed.
I'm not sure if it was targeted at kids and teens. They did Good Mythical Morning. I'm not sure if that's what you're thinking of, Andrew. They did do Good Mythical Morning. It was a rather big show. You know, I couldn't tell you exactly what was in it. I didn't really watch it, I must admit, but it was quite large. Like, yeah, he's a pretty well-known person.
Flight and the size of the universe and all this stuff. Yeah. Okay. The universe has been around for probably as long as the scientists are saying. But then he went on to essentially say that, you know, but all truth is God's truth. And this is totally compatible with the Bible. But just so you know, evolution didn't happen. He was a proponent of something called progressive creationism, which essentially was, yes, the world has been around for as long as the scientists say. Right. And these fossils we find are legitimate fossils that are approximately the date that they're saying they are. But God was creating new batches of creatures, special creations at different stages throughout the history of the world.
Whoa.
And then ultimately resulting in the creation of people.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one before. That, like, God had a release schedule for organisms. I have never heard that before. And that was a surprise to me.
So why?
That's a great question.
Right. Why wouldn't he just use evolution? Right? Like, why wouldn't he just, like, start it running and it can do it itself? That would be probably a lot more efficient, right? Like, if you've got a program running that can sort of just do everything for you, like a bot, like, why wouldn't you let it run instead of coming back in and whatever?
Great question. So I remember thinking as I'm reading this, I'm like, it's the first time I ever thought about there being some reconciliation between what we observe in science and my belief about the world. And I just remember thinking, this doesn't feel like a good explanation.
All right, pause the.
Right. That doesn't seem like a good explanation, right? Like, when you talk about it, like, sort of God releasing these animals just to have 99% of them go extinct, before you put humans there. Why? Like that's the whole point. That's why it's not a good explanation. It's because your previous paradigm, right? The way you think about things, your previous paradigm is that the world was placed here for humans, but there is billions of years before humans, that God is creating these batches of animals, releasing them into the wild, and then extincting almost all of them. Why? It doesn't make a lot of sense, right?
Video. So notice how Rhett's first reaction here is hesitation. He doesn't like progressive creation. He's not comfortable with it, but he starts to sense some sort of like tension. Here's something that is crucial to notice here.
Yeah, that's the whole point. That it's not a very good explanation. That it lacks, as far as explanations go, any kind of depth at all. It's basically more like, well, we notice all of these fossilized animals, 99% of them have gone extinct. We want to believe that Adam and Eve was only around for X amount of time, since, 40,000 years or whatever. So all of the other animals must have been created by God. But at that point, you're not explaining what's happening. You're coming up with accommodations for awkward facts in your model. That's the problem. What evidence do we have that God actually did create these things in batches? Progressive creationism. We don't have any. We have literally none. Like none whatsoever. And Rhett talks about reading Francis Collins' book. And Francis Collins is a old Earth creationist. He believes in evolution, did the Human Genome Project. Really good scientist, I might add, like really good geneticist. But he basically says that evolution is a fact. It absolutely did happen. And he states in his book that just the genetic evidence alone is conclusively proves evolution. Just that alone, without all the fossils, without all the other, sort of testable predictions, without everything else, just the genetic data alone proves evolution.
Discomfort with progressive creation is actually a distraction. It's easy to think that Rhett's main problem is that Hugh Ross's approach feels awkward or unsatisfying, but that's not the real issue.
Yeah, it is. It's not that it's just awkward and unsatisfying. It's just, it doesn't explain anything. It's a really bad explanation for why we have, 4 billion years of organisms that have popped up and then gone extinct. For the most part, they've gone extinct. It's just a really, really bad explanation because it doesn't explain why. Right? That's the problem. It's sort of like, well, God did this thing. Why? We don't know. It's not just that it's unsatisfying or awkward. It fails to explain it. It seems like I hate to use the word, but a rescue device. Like, well, God just did it this way. Like, that's not an answer. That's a non-answer.
In fact, it's entirely possible to be a fully convinced Christian and think progressive creation is a bit weird, or even just reject the view outright. Plenty of
Sure. But this what starts the deconstruction process going. Oh, Michael, good to see you. I do have an interview with Michael. I've set it to appear. It is on Michael's channel, though, if you want to see it ahead of time, but it will appear on my channel tomorrow. I've set it to come up. It's a really good talk I have with Michael. So if you want to, go over and see it on Michael's if you want it earlier. If not, it'll come up like in a day. So yeah. So this isn't a case of, well, he could have been a Christian and still believed in this. Yes, but you've got to understand that the deconstruction process isn't like, well, I'm going to deconstruct all my beliefs except for this one. That's not how it works, right? Ideally, when you're deconstructing, you're even trying to deconstruct yourself. And what does that mean? So what we have when we have sort of the idea of an ego, and Sigmund Freud did a lot of writings on the ego, is this idea of who we are based upon all of these assumptions and all of these things. But there is an idea that that doesn't actually exist, that we just are thoughts and sense perception. We're not these things that we're sort of ascribing to ourselves. And so deconstructing ourselves and then basically going, well, what am I really? What are my thoughts really? Who am I? Is really, the main thing of serious deconstruction, and finding out sort of, I'm an amalgamation of memories, thoughts, feelings, senses, essentially. This isn't a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice the ego and say, hey, this Mark Reed persona that I'm living in doesn't exist, so I'm going to throw it away. No, it's important. It is important to have that. But at the same time, understanding that that is sort of a emergent property or emergent personality of just a few things, just a few things that you are, right? Like just a few of these thoughts, emotions, senses, memories, and that's about it. Like there is no Mark Reed actually. It's very important to understand that, but at the same time, it's not necessary to go that deep. But this is what I see in a lot of Christians. They'll go, well, I'll deconstruct all my other assumptions, but not the God one. Why? It's disingenuous. It is so, you are never going to get to that stage of building up an accurate viewpoint of the world if you cannot deconstruct an idea to construct it up again. Like it's fine if you deconstruct it and then construct it up again. That's fine. I don't have a problem with it. Your experience is your experience. But a lot of them go, no, I won't touch that one. The question is, why not? Why are you afraid of deconstructing a God belief? I don't think it's a very, I get a lot of answers. Oh, because that's truth, and without it, I have no truth. Really? Really? It's just sort of a unwillingness to deconstruct that which you want to be true so dearly. And that is part of the deconstruction process, is letting go what you want to be true and instead believing what is true, what you can show to be true, what has support for it to be true. And if your only excuse is, well, it's God, so I can't deconstruct it, there's a problem there.
Faithful Christians land in different places on these science faith questions without their entire faith collapsing. So let me stress again, this is not Rhett's core issue. It's merely a symptom.
No, it's not a symptom. So this is the start of a deconstruction process, and Rhett deconstructing the God belief, because once he starts to go, well, the young Earth thing isn't true, right? But I've got to deconstruct that. As it turns out, there's no evidence for an old Earth and tons for, there's no evidence for a young Earth and tons for an old Earth. Okay, well, that's not true. And then he deconstructs the evolution thing and creation thing. Well, there's no evidence that the, Adam and Eve, snake in the garden, actually happened as he previously believed. And it was a case of evolution. Okay, that's not true. So having grown up with those, it is natural for him to follow, well, what about the Bible? And he did mention in the interview that Cameron didn't talk too much about, that he sort of learnt how the Bible was put together sort of in seminary. Like, it's not a case where this is all, these stories, we know who wrote the Gospels, because, spoiler, we don't, right? We know that parts were added to the Bible, like the long ending of Mark. And when you start to go, well, okay, deconstruct the Bible, it isn't the reliable source I've been told all my life, so you deconstruct that as well. And it's naturally to go to, well, let's deconstruct God. What actual reason do I have for believing in it, other than A, I've been told all my life, and B, everyone tells me that these feelings are from God. Like, where does that actually lead you? And that's why Christians will basically go, well, no, you can't question God. You can't test God. You can't. What they're saying is you can't deconstruct God because we're afraid we can't construct it back up. Right. And that will spoil what they want to be true. But, I would rather believe in what is true rather than sort of, feel good about something that is not.
The real turning point, the thing that actually triggered his spiritual collapse, is something far deeper, far more subtle, and is something you yourself could be vulnerable to if you're not careful. And remember, I'm going to explain exactly how to avoid falling into the same trap toward the end of the video.
The same trap. Yeah, because deconstruction is just a trap, like building up the most honest, accurate, and truthful version of reality you can is just a trap, It's just a ruse. It's just what? Like, it's not a trap. It's not a trap, dude. It's a process at which you try to justify the long-standing beliefs that you have had. That's all. That's it. Wow.
So stay tuned. Now, here's where things get even more interesting, though. In this next clip, Rhett and Alex start talking about evolution directly. So let's roll the clip.
But yeah, I mean, the biggest problem for me that evolution poses to the Christian.
I don't know why. I just love how Alex, I know it's his accent, and I should be the last person to hassle anyone's accent, please. But the way that he says evolution, it just makes me smile every time. And that's a very British way of pronunciation, usually the sort of, upper class university. Oh, evolution. It just makes me laugh because evolution, I've heard it called evolution by Christians before.
And a lot of Christians today just accept evolution. They're like, yeah, sure,
Right.
Humans all have a common ancestor with other animals. The biggest problem that I think it poses is the seeming like arbitrariness with.
All right, Kian, you've got your warning. Stop. Like, atheism isn't a fad, it's a position on one proposition. Do you believe there's a God? That's all. It's not a fad, it's not a cool thing, it's not a phase, it's not a thing. If you're not willing to give people the respect of their beliefs, you're going to be leaving here quite fast. Like, if you're basically saying, hey, I'm doing a fad, then you are showing a distinct lack of respect for my beliefs. Right? Do you think I'm just following a fad? Really? Even though I grew up in a secular household, I didn't even have a concept of a God until I was a certain age. No argument on God has actually convinced me, but you're just dismissing it as a fad. I think, yeah, I'm going to give you a timeout. That's just rude. Holy crap. You are a rude boy, Kian. What the hell? I mean, that would be like me saying, hey, your Christianity's just a fad. Like, seriously, get the hell out of here. I'll time you out for 5 minutes. Get out of here. A fad. And a big welcome to In Time. Thank you so much for joining me. It is awesome. Yeah, but I mean, I have never said Christianity is a fad or just a, oh, you're just doing a fad by joining Christianity. No, I give people the respect for their beliefs. There are some people, I think, that are not honest about their beliefs, but I think most Christians are. They truly believe it. I think they have the wrong reasons for believing it, but I'd never dismiss it as a fad or you're just doing a thing. You're just, that's just rude, yo. Seriously. It's just a fad. Don't project yourself onto me, dude. Seriously. I never was a Christian ever in my life. It's not a fad. Like, seriously. What kind of fad lasts 40 something years? Like, seriously. What is your problem, dude? Wow.
Which you have to say that, presuming that our apish ancestors don't get to inherit eternal life, at some point a mother gives birth to a child, and the child is morally condemnable to hell, but also potentially has the ability to inherit eternal life, but his mother doesn't.
Right.
And what the difference is there. And maybe it's just a brute fact. Maybe God just breathed life into that particular organism, but it just seems a bit arbitrary and unfair.
Yeah.
That person's suffering will now be redeemed, and it now means something. But their mothers, who is the same organism.
Right. So Alex is here talking about the cutoff in the in the old Earth creationist model, so we're talking about Christians that believe the Earth is, 4 billion years old. Yeah, election weekend. Yeah. Yes, and I think Dutton is an evil man. So thank you, James, and same to you, mate. Happy democracy sausage, my friend. I haven't voted yet. I'm going to go and do so on the day because usually it's a short wait. Hey, Joe, good to see you. Did you just raid me as well? Oh, everyone's raiding me. But thanks to In Time, really love it. But what Alex is talking about here is basically that if you are a old Earth creationist, then even if you follow evolution, at some point, or as Alex says, evolution, which makes me cackle every time. There's got to be a cutoff between sort of some more primitive ancestor, like a Cro-Magnon man, or a Homo habilis, or something like that. Even if it's way back, like some Australopithecine sort of ancestor, and modern humans, that God breathed the breath of life and suddenly they're redeemed from their sins. And we know that Homo habilis made tools. They were quite intelligent. We know that sort of even the Australopithecines, I think they were saying they did have some burial sites kind of thing. So they had some sort of burial rituals, although I would have to have, Erica Gutsit fact check me on that one. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, we know that some of these more primitive humans had sort of, the intelligence to make tools and do certain things and, bury their dead and things like that. So like when he says it seems a bit arbitrary that, a sort of Cro-Magnon person would have a son, and that's Adam, and all of them are not saved, but suddenly they are because Adam had the breath of life. It does seem very arbitrary that is the cutoff point for no reason at all. Yeah, this seems to be a different video. This seems to be Cameron by himself, Kip. I think I saw that one out of the corner of my eye when I was watching this and seeing if it was any good. But I might have to go through that, as I presume that was a longer video. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really care about Apostate Prophet. It's just, yeah, I'm not even sure what made him convert. I don't, it doesn't really worry me. He was hanging out with David for ages, so I was sort of like, yeah, he'll probably convert to Christianity because he's hanging out with David so much. And it's weird. David Wood, his reasons for Christianity all seem pragmatic, right? They all seem to be, well, Islam's bad, Christianity's going to counter it. Christianity's better for society. None of that is a reason to believe in a God. Like, all of his reasons seem entirely pragmatic, which is weird. They just seem to be, well, it's good for, people. It helps control people. It helps society. It fights against Islam. Yet none of that is a reason to believe that something is real. It's just basically saying, hey, the consequence of it being prevalent in society is good. I don't know. It's weird. To me, it does not speak of a person that believes in it. Rather, they believe in the efficacy of it, which is a totally different thing altogether.
Same suffering, same lifestyle, same everything.
Yeah.
Dies like an animal. It just doesn't seem right to me. Yeah. Unless you want to say that personhood is something which develops as well, but that gets you into a whole lot of trouble.
And so that's where I ended up going, right? Because when I was...
Okay, so Rhett says that this alleged problem of arbitrariness is what started him down this path of...
Well, no, it's just that's not what Rhett said. No, it wasn't the problem of arbitrariness. It was a problem that Dee had long-held beliefs that were demonstrably false, started him down this. So Cameron's just sort of taking this one example of one of the problems, just one small problem, holding to that old Earth creationist belief and saying that started him down the track. No, it didn't. He already went through that. You showed it in the clip. He believed in a young Earth. That cracked apart. He believed in creationism rather than evolution. That cracked apart, right? Like, so it's not what started him down there. So don't say that. And this is why I really dislike the way they've come out and all sort of, I mean, I put it on the thumbnail, they're Christo-splaining a deconstruction process. They're basically mansplaining Rhett's move away from Christianity. And that's really bad to hear, because that's not what started him down the path of it.
Deconstruction. Let me just briefly jump in and say something really important here. Okay, yes, no one wants mom outside of the gates. However, this problem is not actually as powerful as they think. Okay, let me quickly show you why. So first, salvation is not about being biologically human. It's actually about having a rational soul made in the image of God. If anyone has a rational soul, they are capable of being saved. And then second, who's to say that animals won't be in heaven? The Bible.
Well, yeah, the Bible doesn't say, and neither will most people. That's the thing. I think that the Bible sort of says you need to have the breath of life in which to be saved. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'm sure Kip can correct me if I am wrong. But, you know, it's just, it's not the reason why he's going down there. It's just one sort of explanation. Or one problem that comes up when you go for old earth creationism. It's basically that, you know, it seems very, very weird that, you know, you're going to get to heaven and there's a bunch of Neanderthals standing around, you know, presumably throat singing and, you know, bashing each other with clubs or something. It's a bit odd that with evolution, there must have been some place for Adam to start. And you're basically saying, well, all of their ancestors, you know, will go to heaven. Wait, if evolution is true, then there's going to be microbes in heaven? Like there's going to be fish in heaven? There's going to be like, what are we talking about here? Like, because the ancestors go all the way back to the single-celled organisms. I have no idea.
Doesn't exclude that possibility. So as intriguing as Alex and Rhett's point seems to be here, this whole arbitrariness thing is just yet another distraction. It's not the real reason that Rhett deconstructed.
He doesn't say that it is. He doesn't say that that is. That's the thing that he's doing here. He's sort of pointing to one of the things that is problematic about the belief that there is this question of, well, do Cro-Magnon or do Australopithecines go to heaven? Right? That's one of the problems along the way, and no one seems to have an answer for it. In fact, you don't have an answer, Cameron, because you're saying, well, it may be that animals go to heaven. Well, is that the case or not? And I will bet my ass Cameron would say that he doesn't know. Like, he doesn't know whether animals go to heaven or not. Pastors and the priests are usually very, very reticent about answering that question. And I've noticed that on a lot of other Fundamentalist fails videos. They're sort of like, well, we don't have any evidence they don't, but we don't have any evidence they do. The reason why is because ostensibly it is humans that will go to heaven, but nobody wants to tell their congregation that, you know, Fluffy the cat is going to be, you know, obliterated after they die, because people care about their pets and they care about animals. So they more just go, well, we don't know. But through the church history, that has never been the case, that, you know, animals are going to be, you know, standing in line with you at the pearly gates, you know, like a dog in front and a stag behind just waiting to be let in. I don't think so. And then there's another question, if that's the case, are animals going to be raptured? Are we going to see a cow like just vanish and lifted into heaven? Like and what qualifies the animal for heaven and the, you know, the cow to heaven and the badger to hell? There's all these other questions that come up. You know, and then do animals must have souls then? And so if we are destroying animals to eat, doesn't that mean that we're destroying something with a soul? It causes more problems than it solves, to be honest with you.
That's coming up very soon. So then let's go a step deeper. All right. In this next clip, Rhett explains how he tried to hold on to Christianity by looking to other Christians who accept evolution. And honestly, this clip is really revealing. It's going to give us another important piece of the puzzle. Let's go ahead and watch it.
And so that's where I ended up going, right? Because
Yeah.
when I didn't really buy into the progressive creationism thing, but I was so sure that evolution didn't happen. I was like, when you're raised in the Christian faith, and the only exposure to the idea of evolution you've ever had has come through the filter of a Christian scientist telling you why it's not legitimate. You know, somebody comes into your church and they're like the evolution expert, and they're like, they make it seem so impossible that you walk out of that with a full affirmation of the idea that evolution definitely didn't happen. And it's
and I'll back this up, what Rhett's saying here. Like, I've had debates over at Standing for Truth over on other people's channels about evolution. And it's kind of like they will sit there and say, oh, none of the scientists believe evolution anymore. It's a failing, you know, religion kind of thing. It's basically being discarded by the scientific community. And you're sort of like, you actually believe that, don't you? Because that's what they're being told by their pastors and their priests and all of the authorities they have. They're being told, hey, evolution is failing. Everyone knows it's not true. And it's basically being dumped by the wayside. Creationism is just about to, you know, be the new scientific thing because it's true. And, you know, all that has to happen is with, you know what I mean? They get told this stuff and then they repeat it and it sounds ridiculous because obviously evolution is not failing. It's not, creationism isn't just about to take over as the predominant theory. Like, all of this is not true. But they absolutely believe it. They absolutely believe it. It's absolutely incredible that they will sit there and tell you with a straight face that, you know, oh, evolution is just crumbling away as a theory. It's, you know, it's got no evidence for it and it's just about to fail. I don't know what planet you're living on at that point. It's sort of maybe that echo chamber kind of thing because everyone's telling them the same thing around them, but it really is not. I don't know what to tell you, but yeah, I can imagine that Rhett being sort of on Crusaders for Christ on university campuses and things like that. That would what be everybody saying to him, and so a lot of deconstruction is looking at those things that everyone's telling you, pulling them apart and saying, hey, like, I'm actually going to find evidence and justification for this.
It's a horrible explanation. It will be debunked by the scientists themselves within our lifetime. Like, that's the kind of stuff that we told ourselves, right?
Right.
And we firmly believed it. But because of this proposal, this progressive creationist idea.
Yeah, and so that's, I think, is an important point when you're sitting there going, well, they couldn't possibly believe this stuff. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they actually do. It's why I'm hesitant to speak for Christians. Oh, well, they don't really believe that. They're just being a shill or they're just selling something. Sometimes I have that suspicion. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I do. But it's very hard to tell because some of them do firmly believe this stuff. And they will believe it because they start with God. God's the truth. There's nothing but God. It has to be the truth. So therefore, that they will not change, you know, the way they think. It's wild. It is wild.
Because the age of the universe and the age of the Earth, from a geological, I'm always been interested in geology, but from a geological standpoint, I was like, oh, well, this is inescapable. Like, this isn't like the way that Answers in Genesis has framed this issue is, I mean, I'm not going to say it's definitely disingenuous. I think they really just believe that it has to, you know, be consistent with the Bible. And so they're just willing to just completely reshape everything that they're seeing in light of that.
Yeah, and that's the problem. The Answers in Genesis, their mission statement is to go to show the glory of God in all of the things that, in all of the world kind of thing. They're not starting, like a lot of scientific institutions, they're like, our mission statement is to observe the world and interpret it through a scientific lens to provide the truth of the reality. Whatever, I'm absolutely paraphrasing, but something like that. Answers in Genesis isn't like that. Their mission statement is to start with God first. They're basically saying, hey, we're going to start with God and then find all of the reasons why that presupposition is true. That's essentially their mission statement. I can probably pull it up if you'd like, because they're not shy about it. That's the thing. They're not sort of trying to hide it or anything like that. They are absolutely doing that, and they will, declare that on their website. It isn't like they're being, subtle about it or anything. Is it Arts and Genesis or Creation Ministries? Maybe is the one I'm thinking of. About Us, yeah. Okay. So this is Creation Ministries, right? So our vision to see the Lord Jesus Christ honored as creator and savior of the world. Our mission is to support the effective proclamation of the gospel by providing credible answers that affirm the reliability of the Bible, in particular its Genesis history. Right? So this isn't, hey, we're going to find out what the truth is. This is, we have the answer. How do we get credible answers that affirm the truth that we've already got? You might be right that there's a problem there, right? That instead of looking and saying, hey, our mission is to find the truth, their mission is to affirm their conclusion, and that's an issue.
But I essentially was like, well, this doesn't make any sense. So then the idea of considering evolution, which just felt, I was like, am I actually about to do this? And I was like, well, I think C.S. Lewis believed in evolution. You start saying these things like, but there's a lot of Christians who are like theistic evolutionists. And okay, so maybe there's something to this. So I read Francis Collins' book, The Language of God.
Right. And I just want to say, Francis Collins is an amazing scientist. Worked on the Human Genome Project. He did tons of work in genetics. But his position was the genetic evidence alone would confirm, like, that is the nail in the coffin for young Earth creationism, or really any creationism. It absolutely is. Evolution is absolutely a fact. Francis Collins is adamant about it. And he's a Christian. I think his Christian conversion story is a little weird. It wouldn't convince me. He saw a waterfall and it reminded him of the Trinity. Well, okay, mate, but that wouldn't convince me.
And the thing that I took away from that book was that, well, evolution happened as well.
So notice what is happening here. All right. Rhett is actively trying to find a way to stay Christian by seeking out believers who already accept evolution.
He really doesn't want to go to, do I have justification for the God? Because Christianity as a religion tries to preclude its followers from in any way trying to deconstruct their God belief. It basically goes, you shouldn't doubt God, you shouldn't test God, doubt's terrible. All of this kind of stuff. It basically will say, do not think about your God belief, just believe. And if you do doubt, if you stop believing, you're going to go to hell. So it basically puts a fear of even starting down that road, because that's how you get to hell and you'll miss out on your place in heaven. I think Christianity might be one of the biggest and earliest promoters of FOMO I have ever seen, right? The fear of missing out. Like, can you imagine how, like, we study the fear of missing out, like you're going to miss a sale kind of thing. So you buy it because they say limited time only. Christianity is the master of FOMO. If you don't believe on your dying day, then you miss out. And so it precludes them from any kind of thing. Left-handed Jedi, when you sign a faith declaration as part of your job, you are locked in and can't be trusted. Yeah, mate, $5 super chat, worth way more. Absolutely. Did you want to go through? I tell you what, just for you, Jedi, let's go through the statement of faith on Creation Ministries. Why not? Let's see what they have. Statement of faith. So this is, I believe this is sort of, so doctrines and beliefs. See also good news. Okay. I'm not sure why, but so this is basically what they have to believe to work or be involved with them. The scientific aspects of creation are important, but are secondary importance to the proclamation of the gospel, Jesus Christ as sovereign, creator, redeemer, and judge. This first one is why they are not a scientific institution, because they will basically go, well, yeah, science is important as long as it supports the gospel of Jesus. That's secondary to it. The doctrines of creator and creation cannot ultimately be divorced from the just gospel of Jesus Christ. The final guide to the interpretation of scripture is scripture itself. Wow, that is so not useful. Like, seriously? Like, if you can't interpret the scripture properly, how do you interpret the script? Wow. Wow. So the 66 books of the Bible, the written word of God. The Bible is divinely inspired and inerrant throughout. Its assertions are factually true in all the original autographs. It is the supreme authority, and not only in matters of faith and conduct, but everything it teaches. Its authority is not limited to spiritual, religious, or redemptive thieves, but includes its assertion in such fields as history and science. Yeah, the book's right, first and foremost, right? And this is what they have to agree to in order to think. I'm not going to go through all of it, but you can see the problem there, right? And when you start to look at the Bible, some of it is absolutely ridiculous. Like, some of it's ridiculous. The way to get striped goats is when they're breeding, you put them in front of striped branches, like branches in slats kind of thing. That's how you get striped goats. Like, for them to say, hey, that's inerrant and all true, and it's true in science, is ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That is an old wives' tale that has somehow made it into a book of mythology that they still think is true. It's wild. It really is wild. But thank you, Jedi. I really appreciate it. Dude. Okay.
He's realizing that the issue might not be evolution itself. Other Christians handle it just fine, but something deeper is clearly bothering him. I want to highlight Rhett genuinely wanted to remain a Christian. He wasn't just looking for some excuse.
Yeah, I agree. He did want to remain a Christian. But once you start that deconstruction process and start to go, well, hey, what else is it that I believe that is not true? Right? Like, of all of these things, if one belief is wrong and this belief is wrong and this, what else is it that I believe that is not true? So for you to sort of say, well, you want to remain a Christian, so why don't you just remain a Christian? Some people are more honest than that and want to deconstruct everything. Oh, hi, Deviant. How you doing? So good to see you. No one's hiding. Come on.
Used to leave. He was sincerely searching for answers from within the faith. Yet even after reading Francis Collins, a devout Christian who fully embraces evolution, it wasn't enough. Rhett genuinely tried to reconcile evolution and Christianity, yet he still deconstructed. Now things are reaching a critical turning.
Yeah, because he's doing deconstruction properly, which is sort of nothing like going, well, is this belief correct? Can I justify this God belief? You don't just stop because you've gone, well, all of those beliefs are wrong, but this one can't be wrong. An honest person will go, well, what else do I believe that could be wrong? And start to deconstruct everything.
Point. In this next clip, Rhett describes what he calls a huge moment, the kind of moment that really does shake you to your core. And many people mistakenly think that this moment is when Rhett lost his faith, but as you'll see, it's actually not the full story. So let's listen closely here.
That was a huge moment for me. I remember coming home, still living in North Carolina. Again, a lot of people think that the story that is often told is that Link and I were Christians. We came to Los Angeles. We were corrupted by this sinful city, and we threw away our faith. And the reality, and I've told it many times, but it's passed over, is all this happened when I was in North Carolina. Right. This happened when I was completely buckled into the Bible Belt as tightly as you can be, surrounded by people who agree with me about all these things.
Right. So this part of the interview, and I have seen the interview between Brett and Alex, I'll just say that again, is he's talking that he came out to California to do his show, started Good Mythical Morning, and people assumed that he went to California and he just sort of lost his faith there. What he's saying is that he lost his faith before he was actually doing the Good Mythical Morning podcast, before doing any of this stuff, he lost his faith surrounded by Christians, which is probably a lot harder. But he's really just dispelling the idea for people that it was just a change in location. It was trying to fit in with the heathen atheists and Satanists out in California or whatever. That wasn't it. He's just dispelling that.
With no social pressure to deviate from that at all.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, a lot of social pressure to stay in the fold.
opposite.
Right.
So I was struggling a lot because I didn't have anybody to talk to about this.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Link. I talked to Link about it a little bit, and he would just kind of be like, "Oh shit!" Like it felt like you're learning a lot of things that seem problematic, but I'm not going to think of. I don't want to think about this.
Yeah.
Jessie, my wife, who did come from like a young Earth creationist background, like that's that's what she was taught growing up. When I came home.
Yeah, and this is the thing. There's a lot of pressure for Christians to not question and not go down that route, because, like I said, Christianity it teaches not to doubt. It teaches not to question. It teaches not to test, and really, sort of that investigative thought about my beliefs. It will say, no, you can't do that with God. Like you don't want to question God, and there'll be a lot of pressure coming from all sides for you not to do that. And I think that, Rhett seems like a really genuine guy. I really do. Look, get the band hammer out. Yeah, no preaching in the chat. We don't do that. And be respectful. This is my chat, so please be respectful. Holy crap!
And I was like, we need to talk about something. And I said, I am thoroughly convinced that evolution is true and that we are related to every other animal. I believe in common ancestry, and I just think that it is not just. I sort of think it's true. It's just like my reading has led me to think that if this isn't true, then I actually can't determine what anything that's true. It's so overwhelming, because I'd read additionally to that. She just starts crying because she knew what this represented.
Right.
Okay, this moment is very intense. It's easy to see why people might think that this encounter, this painful conversation with his wife, where he shares his thoughts about evolution, is the precise moment where Rhett lost his faith.
No, he never said that. He never said that. He might just be pointing that out for his audience, but he never said that, right? And I think that he's sort of saying, well, by his wife knowing what this was that he would begin to deconstruct everything. That he would start to look at everything, whether it was true or not. Just because you have a wrench, it doesn't mean you can tell me what to do. Mate, I was in somebody's chat the other day, and I was a moderator, and they said, they were talking about trans issues, and they admitted they didn't know much about trans issues. And I'm like, well, then STFU about trans issues if you don't understand a lot about it, because you're making these claims. And they said, make me. And I was like, I had to, right? I had to. It was so good. If someone's being a jerk in chat and they say, oh, make me shut up to a moderator, you know where that's going. Like, seriously, that's an obligation at that point. That's a malicious compliance at that point. I can guarantee not Antarctica, Robin. I can guarantee not Antarctica. Okay, he did not come from Antarctica. I'll tell you that right now.
But it's actually not. So then what is it? If it's not evolution, what is it? In this next clip, Rhett explicitly lays out the real reason that he left Christianity. Listen closely to his exact words, because this insight can help protect you from making the exact same mistake.
Oh, protect you from making the same mistake. Do you mention that he's actually a lot happier now, having deconstructed and, built himself back up? He doesn't have a lot of the issues that he has with Christianity and science, Like, this is the thing. Make the same mistake.
She knew what this represented.
Right.
This was the seismic shift. And I think a lot of people that I tell this story to are like, what do you mean? But there's all these Christians that believe in evolution. Like, I can't believe that this was so significant for you. But I think the reason it was is because at that point, I realized how wrong I could be about something so fundamental.
Yeah.
And I never, ever considered that I might be wrong
Right.
about something so fundamental.
Right.
And
And again, at the start I mentioned with deconstruction, it doesn't have to be about faith either. And I used the example, you know, my country is the best country in the world. That's a seismic shift as well. When you start to learn that your country did a whole load of crappy things, and I'm including my country in that as well. Don't think I'm just talking about some, other first world nation. Like my country as well. When you start to understand, hey, we have our things that we do well and things that we've done that are really bad. That's a seismic shift as well. You can't have the same level of, oh, well, go Australia, when you learn that, hey, we committed a case of genocide in the past where we wiped out the Tasmanian Aborigines, for instance. It's like, well, go, yeah, it is these shifts. It is this deconstruction that is very, very useful. Yeah, no, we lost an emu war. Like, how good can my country be if we learn that we lost a war to emus? It's a seismic shift, right?
And then not only was I wrong, but all of these Christian apologists who were so sure about their critiques of evolution, they had missed the boat so significantly on this that suddenly I was like, can I trust anything else they've got to say about this? So that was the first big domino.
All right, so let's slow down.
Yeah, so he's basically saying, hey, can I trust everything they say on God if they're wrong about this other stuff? Is the Bible a reliable book? Is any of this true is the question. That begins the deconstruction process. Only one genocide? Amateurs. Well, there were a lot of massacres and stuff like that. Well, the thing is, Chrissy, it's not just these days. America's done some really horrific stuff in the past. There's been Vietnam War, there's been interfering in Iran and installing a Shah in Iran. The CIA's been running around doing all kinds of horrific things all over the place. It's not just these days. It's done some horrific things in the past as well. The internment of all the Japanese people, Trail of Tears. You really look at it and you go, well, yeah, just because you're the winner doesn't mean you're the greatest. And the thing is that there's some amazing things about America. The Constitution is one of the best documents that has ever been written. It has such a good, or it used to have such a good view of liberty for its citizens. There's all kinds of things, but that doesn't mean it's the best country in the world kind of thing, right? Like, here's the thing, there's no country that's the best country in the world, unless you're talking about a very specific metric, right? If you're talking about, education, it's probably Finland, right? Like, they have the best education system in the world. But there's other things that Finland has problems with. Like, it's not this case of, well, ours is automatically the best one.
And really unpack what's going on here, because
oh, you're embarrassed? God disapproves. Well, it looks like you're that looks like, is that Vishnu these days? No, Vishnu's the elephant one. Is that Shiva that you're actually, or is it Brahma? I'm not sure. I'm not great on Hindu gods, to be honest with you. It might be Shiva, the creator destroyer.
This right here, what Rhett just expressed, is absolutely crucial to understanding his deconstruction. He realized two things that profoundly shook him. One, he could be wrong about something deeply fundamental. And then two, the trusted Christian authority figures in his life could also be fundamentally wrong. Now, if Rhett thought that was unsettling, I've got some really bad news for you guys. The situation is actually a lot worse than he describes. Not only can our favorite authority figures be wrong, but for nearly every single significant issue, you'll find highly respected authorities on all sides. Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, Jews, Muslims, atheists, they all have intellectual heavyweights with PhDs and decades of study. Everyone claims that evidence, logic, and scholarship are on their side. So simply saying my authorities could be mistaken actually barely scratches the surface of the problem.
Yeah, the problem is the Bible could be wrong as well. And the entire religion can be wrong as well. That's the problem that you have. That when people start going, well, is there any reason to believe this religion? usually you come up with there isn't a sufficient reason. That's where faith steps in, and you've got to just believe it because you believe it. You believe it because that's what you want. And if you're deconstructing a lot of the time, and I'm not saying every time, some people do come up with good reasons why they believe in Christianity after deconstruction. It's not necessarily a given, but a lot of people come up with, well, I can't justify a belief in this religion. Because here's the secret, Cameron. The entire religion can be wrong. And if you go, oh, the entire religion can't be wrong, you think the entire religion of Islam is wrong. You think the entire religion is of Hinduism is wrong. You think the entire religion of Scientology is wrong. You know, so yes, an entire religion can be wrong because you think there are religions that are wrong. So, you know, that's the thing.
But wait, it gets even worse. Not only do we face contradictory authorities, we can't fully trust ourselves either. Every single one of us deals with bias, cognitive blind spots, and an extraordinary level of ignorance. Let's be honest, most of us are not philosophical or scientific geniuses, right? Even geniuses make profound mistakes. If authority figures can't guarantee the truth and we ourselves are unreliable, how can we ever hope to find solid ground?
Well, that's where we basically build up confidence with what we know. We start to go back and say, hey, is there a way I can be confident in this thing being true? Like my senses, yeah, they directly come to me. They seem to be reliable, not 100% perfect. And this is where Cameron is doing something that sort of creationists do a lot, which is a black and white fallacy. Now, the black and white fallacy is basically where you say, oh, well, it's all or nothing, basically. What's a good example? A good example is when you say, oh, well, you know, we can't get rid of guns, so we should just, not restrict them at all. No, that's black and white. There's a lot of wiggle room in between getting rid of all guns, all illegal guns, and not doing anything about them at all, right? There's a lot of gray area in there to say, hey, we can do this, this, and this, even though it won't get rid of all of the illegal guns, it will help with the problem, right? So this is a black and white thing that he's saying, well, if you can't have absolute certainty that your senses are real, or you can trust science, sometimes it gets things wrong, then, you can have no confidence whatsoever. But no, that's not the case. What we're doing is we're building up confidence regarding not all guns. No. So what we essentially did is put huge regulations on guns and got rid of a lot of the ones that were just sort of, farmers had them and all of this had them and required strict licensing in order to have them. Basically what it did, and there's still illegal guns around. The police still make busts. They still find illegal guns. But what it does is it basically, like, a gun on the black market in Australia would probably cost you, depending on what it is, like $30,000, right? So nobody's just going out there and, buying them willy-nilly and to do this kind of stuff. And the police can target more heavily, any kind of incident where someone lets a shot off. So, getting rid of guns completely is kind of untenable, right? There'll always be a black market or a underground, people bringing them in, people importing them illegally. But the whole point is that if you make it really difficult, it eliminates a lot of the problems, right? Like, it eliminates a lot of the problems. So it's not this black and white, well, we got rid of all guns that ever existed in Australia. No, that isn't what we did. Let a shot off. Yeah, absolutely. Cut the cheese. Thanks, Aunt Jer. Thanks for pointing out my idiosyncratic way of speaking. I love it. So, it's this black and white of, well, if your senses can be fooled by optical illusions, and if you can't trust them entirely, then don't trust them at all. No, that's not how we do things. We understand that we have confidence in our senses to a certain degree of accuracy. Same with science, right? It's very good at getting answers that, making models that reflect reality. Sometimes they're wrong. That doesn't mean we just throw the entire process out and go, well, nothing can be believed. No, Cameron, it is still the most reliable way to get correct information. So what Cameron's doing is just sort of trying to undermine any kind of certainty with saying you can't be absolutely certain. And that is not how that works.
Now, what I want to point out is that this situation, this confusion, limited knowledge, conflicting authorities, and our own internal biases is exactly what we would expect if Christianity is true. Think about it. The Bible.
Why would all of these uncertainty be true if the Bible is true? Like, why, if the Bible is true and there's a God who's omniscient that would know how to communicate information in a way where it wouldn't be misinterpreted, why would it be true that there's all this kind of confusion around? I don't understand why that follows. This seems to be just a random assertion.
Explicitly warns us in Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is so deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it?
Yeah, so I think that this is sort of, you know, a time where it was something called cardiocentrism. Now, what cardiocentrism is, it is thinking that, and you know, I'm not sure if this is, you know, Jeremiah is sort of Old Testament, I believe. It would have been around the time where it sort of flourished, especially in Greece. They thought that the heart did the thinking, right? Because when you thought stuff or thought about somebody you loved, you would feel it in your heart. So they kind of, cardiocentrism is this idea that the heart is actually the seat of consciousness. And so, you know, we absolutely know better nowadays. Like we know that we know that the brain is the thing that does the thinking. But you know, there was a point in time in the old days that people thought that the heart was the seat of consciousness that did all of the thinking for you. Yeah, the heart was where the mind was. It's very strange, but true.
Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Why?
Do not lean on your own understanding. Well, we're kind of not. We're sort of, you know, we deconstruct and then build it up. But whose understanding are you supposed to lean on then? Because you're not, like, you're not communicating with the Lord. He's not showing you directly. You've got to read a Bible verse. Well, what's the problem there? Well, the Bible verse has to be true. And he's sort of saying, don't trust men because men can be wrong. Trust this Bible verse that was written by a man. What's the problem? Why are you looking at me like that? That isn't contradictory at all. I am being facetious, but there is a truth to that. If you're basically saying, hey, I'm not going to lean on men and then lean on the Bible wasn't written by a God. We can tell this. It was written by men. So, you know, it's kind of like that. Well, don't trust anything except my Bible. Like, come on, really?
Hey, why not lean on our own understanding? In 1 Corinthians 13:12, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully. Even the Catechism of the Catholic Church acknowledges this human limitation very clearly.
Does that say prophecy in tongues afterwards? Okay.
Then I shall know fully. Even the Catechism of the Catholic Church acknowledges this human limitation very clearly. Though human reason is, strictly speaking, truly capable by its own natural power of attaining true and certain knowledge of the one personal God, there are many obstacles which prevent reason from the effective and fruitful use of this inborn faculty.
Hate to break it to you, Cameron, but a man wrote that. That was written by a man. And if he sort of says, well, it was inspired by God. Was it? How do you know that? Aren't you relying on your own knowledge to determine that? Aren't you relying on your own knowledge to think that the Bible is inerrant and correct? Here's the problem. You always have to go through the lens of your own interpretation. So if you can't trust your own mind, as Cameron says, then why would I trust my own mind to listen to him or listen to the Bible? It still has to filter through the lens of your own mind and interpretation. This is the problem. He's basically saying, well, don't trust anything your mind says, but when I say this, follow that and follow the Bible and follow these other things. I still have to filter that through my mind. I still hear you say it. I still read the Bible and I'm listening to my mind. You can't get around that. You can't. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with, don't trust anything, including your own mind. Just believe. For belief's sake. Just believe for no reason whatsoever. That's where it gets you.
Christianity not only acknowledges our limited, biased, and confused state, it actually predicts it. According to Christian teaching, humanity is fallen and limited, our intellect clouded, our hearts deceived. God knows this. Christianity offers a very clear explanation of why we...
It predicts it. I'm not 100% sure it predicts it, mate. I don't think so. Like the knowledge of good and evil, I don't see how that gets to like a confused state. That's very weird.
We find ourselves in precisely this condition. But then let's contrast this with atheism. And
is he talking about the Tower of Babel, which didn't happen? That's one of the things that I believe Rhett mentions, that, hey, the Tower of Babel is a ridiculous way to explain where languages come from. And yeah, it is. It is a ridiculous way to explain where languages come from. Yeah, you're not listening, Kian. I'm saying that in order to think about the divine understanding that you're thinking about, it still has to go through your own mind, which you say is flawed. So you still can't get to, if you're saying the mind is flawed so it can't be relied on, then you thinking that there is a divine wisdom is flawed because you're thinking it. That's the thing. Show that there is a divine wisdom without using your mind to do so, which you've said is flawed. Good luck. Like, seriously. In order to determine its divine wisdom, you've still got to filter it through your mind and your own understanding. You're in a untenable position, because if you want to say that, like, it comes through, you can't filter things through your mind because it is flawed and unreliable, then the idea that a God exists is still coming through that path. Direct intuition? Oh, geez. Wow. Okay, intuition is way less reliable. Okay, so you've got type 1 thinking and type 2 thinking. Type 1 thinking is intuition, right? It's our feelings about things. It's our gut reactions about things. And it is often wrong. We have all kinds of intuitions, like, oh, I can't trust that person. That guy seems a bit shady. This guy seems trustworthy. Those intuitions are not particularly reliable, but they are fast. They can be made very, very fast, right? Type 1 thinking is very quick. Like, oh, that alley looks dangerous. It's your intuition. It may or may not be the case, right? Because it's intuition. Type 2 thinking is rationality. It is going through and actually determining what logically and rationally is the case. Type 2 thinking is way, way, way more reliable. Way more reliable. Look, divine intuition, no, absolutely not. Because you've still got to filter it through your mind to call it divine. You are in a nonsense position saying, I can't rely on my mind. I've got to rely on divine intuition, which my mind tells me is reliable. It's an untenable position. Left-handed Jedi for $5. If the Bible was so important, it would be intact and unable to be interpreted. I absolutely agree. A omniscient, omnipotent God would know how to convey a message in a way that is not up to translation, not up to interpretation, and just be one volume that would be preserved throughout history. Absolutely, an omniscient God would know how to do that. An omnipotent God would be capable of doing that. It's absolutely a good point. Thank you so much for the $5, Left-handed Jedi.
Here's where things get very interesting. If atheism were true, why would we expect a universe that appears orderly and intelligible at all? Even more puzzling, why would blind evolution produce conscious creatures who deeply long for absolute truth, yet find themselves plagued by confusion, biases, and contradictory authorities?
Yeah, because, this whole idea of absolute truth, I don't think we are searching for absolute truth. I think that that's just something you're saying, well, they're searching for God, basically, but why all of this confusion? It's a good point. Apparently God isn't the author of confusion, but he lets like a million denominations just run rampant or conflicting with one another.
Every turn. Under atheism, this messy, frustrating state of affairs is an utterly bizarre outcome. But under Christianity, it's exactly what we should expect.
Okay, so here's the fallacy for this one, and I'll go through this. This is a affirming the consequent fallacy, right? It's basically saying, if there is a God, we would expect this. We see this, therefore there is a God, right? That's affirming the consequent. It's basically like saying, if my cat got into a fight, then we would expect it to have scratches. It has scratches, therefore it got into a fight. Now, what's the problem logically with this one? The problem with this is that, just say the cat fell off a roof and into a bush and got scratches that way, right? There's all kinds of other ways it can have scratches, okay? There's all kinds of other ways. He's basically taking that, oh, I expect there to be confusion if there is a God, as being the reason why there is a God, when it could just be that we are materialistic meat suits in a confusing universe that's very hard to understand, and our limited intellects confined by our brains and the amount of energy we're putting through them is yet unable to understand everything in the universe. That's also another possibility, but it's one that he's excluded because he has used faulty reasoning. And it is faulty reasoning, as I pointed out.
In other words, Rhett's biggest reason for leaving Christianity is actually a reason to embrace Christianity even more strongly. Yes, we can't fully trust authority figures alone.
Yeah, and exceptionally average. Yeah, you're amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. If basically I can't trust my intellect, then why should I listen to you? You've screwed yourself, and I absolutely agree with exceptionally average here. If you're saying, hey, don't trust your intellect, well, my intellect is saying that you're speaking to me. So what now? Why would I trust you? This is the problem that you've got. You want to skip normal chains of epistemology and go straight to, well, here's the conclusion. No, I won't do that, because that is not a reliable way to the truth. It's not. Okay, if I jump to the conclusion, then find all the ways to support it, that is not a reliable way to the truth. So no, I won't be doing that.
Yes, we can't fully trust ourselves, but this doesn't drive us away from Christianity.
How do you know divine intuition is trustworthy? How do you know divine intuition is trustworthy, Kian? Like, you're basically saying, hey, just ignore everything that your mind says and just believe this thing for no reason at all. Maslow? No, Maslow was not talking about divine intuition. No, he wasn't. He was talking about self-actualization. Kian, I've had enough. I've had enough of you. I've had enough of your absolute nonsense. Like, seriously. I first put it to the test and then judge it. With what? You're not using your intellect. How do you judge something without using your intellect? Answer me. How do you judge something? Put it to the test. What? Using your non-intellect? How do you put something to the test without using your mind? It's the same thing as okay, you're done. You're 100% done. I am so sick of you. That is not what Maslow said. It's not anything that he said. You're putting things into people's mouths and you're gone. Banhammer's in the chat. Bye, Kian. You're done. I've had enough of you disrupting the chat with this bullshit, quite frankly.
It points us directly toward God himself as the one true.
Yeah, and then the thing that irritates me, Alex, is you'll put all this nonsense in the chat and then you ask him a question and he just won't answer it. He'll just go off to some other bullshit. So this idea that Maslow was talking about something divine when he was talking about self-actualization in psychology is just a creationist talking point. He's got nothing to actually back it up. So, you know, get out of here, seriously. Get out of my life. Get out of my life. Go away. You know, this whole thing is just nonsense. Yeah, and he doesn't answer that. How do you judge something without your intellect? Oh, let's go to Maslow. Yeah, come on, dude. Seriously, what is wrong with you?
True, reliable authority. That's how Christianity solves Rhett's dilemma. And that's why this deeper problem he identified, which is way worse than he actually explained, is actually very strong evidence for Christianity, not against it.
Yeah, so he's basically saying, just don't doubt Christianity. That's essentially what he's saying. He's saying, hey, doubt everything else, doubt evolution, you know, doubt young earth creationism, doubt, you know, creation, doubt all of these. Just don't judge the God. Don't doubt the God. Just don't go there. And that's essentially what we get. Don't question your beliefs. Don't try and do it. It's funny because the one Christian chat is like, no, test your belief. How do you test a God? The divine hiddenness and things like that. He won't answer. I've gone through this way time and time and time again with that guy, and he doesn't answer. He just goes, don't test it. But test it. But just accept it and embrace it. But test it. It's nonsense. It's basically like, don't think about it. Don't think about how you could be wrong, right? Like, do not think that you ever could be wrong. As long as you don't think you're wrong, you're not wrong. That is not how anything works at all.
No, look, I get it. Realizing that you and the authorities that you've trusted can be deeply mistaken is unsettling. It can even be painful. But here's the encouraging truth. The search for a reliable authority actually points to something profoundly beautiful. It reveals our deep intrinsic need for an authority that never fails, one that we can fully trust. And ultimately, that authority is God himself. When we reject
yeah, so it's basically, so what Cameron's essentially saying is, yeah, on the process deconstruction, you find that all of the people that were telling you this stuff were wrong. All of the people doing apologetics were wrong. You've heard some terrible arguments. You've doubted all of this stuff, but just don't turn away from God. Don't think about your belief in God as being under the same lens. Don't put it to the test. You know what's funny? In scientific endeavors, we're expected to test everything. The more tested something is, the more reliable it is, right? And I'll repeat that again. In science, the more tested something is, the more reliable it is. So evolution that's been tested millions of times through different papers and different experiments, different things, all put to the test. It's reliable because it passed, right? The more it's tested, the better information we have. Yet God is like, no, the less you test it, the better off you are. Why? Why? If your God is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent, what's the problem with testing it? Oh, the book says not to test it. Yeah, I bet it does. I bet that the book written by people that want to propagate the religion says, don't check my religion. I wonder why. I wonder why the people who want to propagate the religion don't say, hey, test this all you want. You're going to find out that it's true. No, what do they say? Don't, God is not tested. Don't doubt, have faith, all of these things which basically say, don't think about why you believe in a God. Don't think about it. Just believe. And that's the message. That's what Cameron essentially just said. Don't think about why you believe in God. Just believe. Nonsense.
Unreliable human authorities, even if we don't realize it, we're actually moving.
Well, if human authorities are unreliable, then shut down your channel.
Closer to God, the one fully trustworthy source of truth. So don't despair if you've had.
Okay, so you don't know that it's the one fully trustworthy source of truth because all you've got to tell you that is a book and other people, which you've already said is untrustworthy. So you don't know that. Okay, you don't. And considering I just brought up something in the book that's untrustworthy, wow, okay.
Doubts like Rhett, use them to draw nearer to the one who can bear the full weight of your trust. Now, having said that, if you want robust, convincing evidence for Christianity's central claim, the resurrection of.
But we can trust our senses to a certain degree. We can trust science to a certain degree. All of these methodologies, and like I said, he's just doing a black and white thing. If you can't trust it absolutely, you can't trust it at all. That is not true. That is 100% not true. And if I believe that God can be absolutely trusted, then I've got something reliable. No, because you don't know that a God even exists, much less can be trusted absolutely. Like your faith, your belief that he can be trusted absolutely is what leads you to say that. It is a circular argument. God is absolutely trustworthy. Therefore, God exists because he is absolutely trustworthy. And God is absolutely trustworthy because God exists. It's just a circular argument. That's all it is. He just presupposes the God. Catch-22 states you cannot question Catch-22. Yep. Nice. I loved that book, actually. Catch-22, I found it to be darkly hilarious. Like it really, I found it to be hilarious. I really did. I did like that book a lot. Just how ridiculous it was. I as I said with an interview with Michael Beverly, I love absurdity. I love absurdity, and that was an absurd book. I did like it.
Jesus, I strongly encourage you to watch my comprehensive 3-hour interview linked down in the description. It'll equip you with exactly the kind of foundation.
Yeah. Shill. No, I got you. I don't have a problem with people selling stuff, but sort of on the back of sort of misquoting. Now, there's a part that he left out that I think is really important, right? So I want to go over to the actual interview, and I just this part's really important for what I want to say, right? And he didn't include it, so I grabbed it myself, and I just want to play it and show you what I think.
So they've got their perspective on the second chromosome and the fusing of that chromosome. Yeah. They've got their perspective on these retroviruses. And I think I was getting to a place where I no longer, I would essentially, I read their responses.
And you can see Rhett's being really genuine here. He's really thinking about his state of mind, what he was going through. He's really trying to articulate and communicate his honest thoughts. And, he seemed really genuine to me. Absolutely genuine.
And I was just like, this can't be right. Like they have to be wrong about this. Like, this is not a good faith argument. This is not a good faith answer, And that's when it started dawning on me that, okay, I began to notice a pattern. And I think maybe I didn't even realize I was noticing a pattern yet, but this is the pattern that started then and then propagated itself throughout my entire deconstruction.
So this is the pattern he's talking about. Now, this is really important to understand that, hey, it was the first startings of deconstruction learning about evolution, but he's more saying this continued throughout. And this is really interesting, and it's really good to pay attention to this, because what he says here, if you're an atheist, if you're involved in debate, you'll probably understand exactly what he's talking about.
And that is, there's a type of answer that someone gives when their allegiance is to the truth that they need to be true. and there's a type of answer that people who are actually interested in the truth give. And what I kept finding is that Christian apologetics, you know, really consists of people who are like, well, the truth cannot be questioned. The truth, we've predetermined that this is true, and now we've got to find a way to buttress that truth. And there's a tenor to those arguments that they don't hold up very well under scrutiny. When you get the answer to the answer to the answer to the answer, you just keep finding, like, it just seems like these people seem to be interested in what actually happened, and these people seem to be interested in the truth that they hope that happened.
Mhm.
Right. And that's the thing, right? And we're seeing it all the time. Cameron himself did that, right? He's basically got the answer, and then he's trying to lead to the answer he hopes is true rather than the answer that is true. And we see this all the time. I've often spoken that science and apologetics, they're kind of like opposite systems. Science, what it does is it makes observations about the world around us and tries to find what is true based upon those observations. Apologetics, what it does is it has what it thinks is true first and then tries to find things to get them to that truth. And we saw that in the chat today. We saw Kian basically go, no, you've got to have the divine thing of God first. And then try and somehow get that to be true, not using his intellect and somehow teleporting to that being true. And so Rhett's not wrong. You see this all over apologetics, that when we go, okay, we're going to deconstruct right back to our naked self. I don't even know if I can say that on YouTube. Anyway, our naked self, like all I have are my senses, my mind, memories. How much is true and how much is not? How much do I know about what's reliable around me and what is not? Let's start off from the basics. My mind, my senses, right? They bring me information. They're pretty good at accurately describing the world as confirmed by other people, you know, and we start to go from there and building up and building up and building up. The apologist is like, well, no, there's a God first. How do you know that? Oh, the God is the knowledge. That's first. How? How did your mind get to that God? Unless you're the God, you can't start there. That's not a correct epistemological chain, because your mind has to interpret that the God is there. It's okay, Team O and B, I am not actually going to get naked, all right? Just you know, but you know what I mean? We want to break all of these assumptions down and see what we can actually build up as being reliable, and that is deconstruction. And so what Rhett's saying, that it does not seem like a good faith argument. It seems very disingenuous to start with the conclusion first and then insert all the things to get to that conclusion, right? That seems like a bad way to find out the truth. What seems to be much more reliable is observing what is around us, building up these models of the world around us according to what we experience and what we can see and what we have. Now, if that includes a God and you say, hey, I experienced a God, I had this revelation or whatever, okay, I've got no problem with that. What my problem is that when you are deconstructing, you do not start with the conclusion and the God first. You cannot. But I notice he missed this part out, which is really important, that for Rhett, the getting at the truth of the matter was not the way apologetics do it. And it's interesting. In another part, he sort of says, like all of the things that convince Christians, they're not what the apologetics do, right? They are never looking. They're never looking at. I've lost my chain of thought, but they're never looking at that deconstruction process in order to build up a reliable belief in God, like whether it's reliable or not. Usually what they're doing is trying to tell people, like Cameron does, don't subject your God belief to any kind of questioning because you might not believe. I think it's kind of a shame. I think it's a real shame that you know, people are scared to challenge their belief in God. If God is true, then what's the problem? Anyway, so yeah, that's the big issues that I have with Cameron, and of course Kian, who is definitely out of here. I'm sorry, I just got sick of that stuff. It just is you know, just annoying. Okay, so assertion never equals fact. Yeah, so there is I won't go into it, but there is a fallibility of knowledge that I think generally knowledge will come back to three outcomes: circular argument, infinite regress, or dogmatic assertion. And yes, that thing of, well, God's divine intervention, you believe in that first, that is just dogmatic assertion. Yes, that is dogmatic assertion. Assertion equal fact if the yeah, well, I mean, if you know what's good for you, Bob, if you know what's good for you. 2 weeks in a row of entertaining. Yeah, no, he was at it last week as well. I think showing him the door is the only way to get him to understand that, hey, you can't just make bold-faced assertions of what we've got to do. You can't just tell us that atheism is a fad. Get out of here, dude. Seriously, yeah, it's just so bad. Nobody expects Spanish Inquisition. Absolutely. Anyway, so that was Cameron Bertuzzi, I think his name is. Yeah, Cameron Bertuzzi. And he kind of, like, from all of that and all of his Bible quotes and stuff, it's really odd that basically he just has gone to, well, don't question God. That's essentially, you can sum it up in that. You know, question evolution, question young earth creationism, question, you know, the creation model of Adam and Eve. That's fine. Just don't question God. Just don't question God. Why not? Why not? Oh, because the Bible says not to. Yeah. If I was writing a book, I would probably write that as well. Don't question your religious beliefs. Sure. Yeah. You know, and we see modern day religions do all kinds of stuff like that. Like the Scientologists basically say, well, don't interact with, you know, I can't remember, they've got a word for them, deniers or you know, these problematic people that don't believe in Scientology. I can't remember, they call them something specific. Scientology non-believers. I can't remember what they call them. Suppressors or something. Suppressive person. Yeah, they're suppressive people. Don't hang out with those, don't listen to those suppressive people. You know, like all of this stuff. Don't question it. Don't question it. Potential trouble source. Damn. I think, yeah, okay. Yeah, Leah Remy. Yeah. She came out and sort of said all this stuff about Scientology, that her mother, I think, got her into it, believed, and she was sort of eventually got to the top and learnt what the beliefs really are and just went, this is ridiculous. And she's not wrong. But as people have pointed out, people will look at the Church of Scientology and go, oh, a galactic overlord, atom bombs in volcanoes, thetans, how ridiculous. But listen to my talking snake that tricked a guy into eating a magic fruit. I mean, really, come on now. You know, they're acting like their own farts don't stink. Anyway, thank you for joining me. That's been another Fundamentalist Friday. Fundamentalist fails on a Friday. It may not be Friday for you, admittedly. It is for me. I love it. But I had a great time. And it's so good to see all you here. Suppress people, those that speak out. I got you. So they're apostates kind of thing. Scientology apostates. Ugh. Well, looks like I'm a suppressive person then. I'm suppressing. Oh, no. All right, peeps. Well, you people take care. Don't forget, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. You don't have to put up with people telling you that you're in a fad because you're an atheist all your life and, you know, just pushing their religion on you. You don't have to put up with that stuff. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye, cool kids.
This old switchboard could talk. Wow, your ears would sizzle. 1880. We take Alexander Graham Bell's invention for granted today. Perhaps we should. But isn't it incredible that millions and millions of people can talk simultaneously to practically any spot on Earth?